What Crush did remember was making the mistake of going over to Detective Des McDermott's house for a small get-together with some friends that turned into anything but. Normally, when parties or events became something he didn't want to deal with, Crush would find the first exit and head on home to his TV and his quiet life. At least, the quiet life he had when he wasn't working undercover, pretending to be a merciless drug dealer, biker, and occasional hitman. But honestly, Crush didn't leave the stupid party because he was, for lack of a better, manlier word, depressed. A word he rarely used about himself. He wasn't much for sitting around, feeling sorry about his life. He was a bear, after all. A polar bear, specifically. No, not one of those guys who insisted on swimming in the Atlantic during the middle of winter to prove how virile he was. But a guy who could swim in the Atlantic during the middle of winter and never worry about dying of hypothermia. A guy who could shift into an 8-foot, 1,200-pound polar bear anytime he wanted to. And, as a polar bear, sitting around being depressed wasn't really his thing. Instead, Crush lived like most of his kind, being curious, asking too many questions, staring blankly at people until they became terrified and ran away, eating whenever he was even slightly hungry, the usual. Too bad, though. Crush had discovered something that all bears found distressing. He discovered there would be change. Change was coming Crush's way, and he hated change. He liked to know things were going along as they should, and when that didn't happen, he became depressed. He still hadn't recovered from the closing down of his favorite deli 5 years ago, or that 6 years ago they'd moved his favorite shoe store. Needless to say that as a 6'9", 300-pound guy, he couldn't exactly pick up his boots and sneakers from the local sports store. And Crush still walked to where the old shoe store had stood, gazing into the window, wishing things were like they once were, until the customers inside the tea shop called police about the crazed meth dealer lurking outside the door. So, no, Crush didn't handle change well, but he didn't see that there was anything he could do to prevent this change from happening. Not after one of his old partners had called him and given him a heads up. The man wouldn't have called unless he was sure. So now Crush was just waiting for the anvil to drop. Unfortunately, it felt like that anvil had already dropped right on his head. He couldn't do this. He couldn't sit here in a coworker's house waiting for the hangover and migraine he had to go away. No, he just needed to get a move on. He had to get up. He had to deal with the pain. He had plans anyway for the afternoon, and he wasn't about to miss out on them. So he had to get up. But there appeared to be a little problem with him just leaping from bed and facing the day, and that problem was the naked female sprawled across his chest.